It's July 1943. The sun hasn't risen yet. You're sitting inside a steel box with 4 other men you know by nickname, never by name. The smell is oil, sweat, and cheap cigarettes. You can't stretch your legs. The sound of the engine has become so familiar you stopped noticing it, until the moment it cuts off, and the silence that follows is worse than anything the engine ever did. You are the gunner. Your job is simple: you see, you aim, you fire. Simple enough on paper. Through the narrow viewport in front of you, you can see the Russian steppe stretching out as far as the eye can see. Grass, dust, horizon. Nothing moves. Not yet. The commander taps your shoulder. He doesn't speak. He just points. You look. On the horizon, rising out of the morning haze like the earth itself is spitting them out, there are tanks. Not 1. Not 10. Hundreds. The ground itself seems to be moving toward you. Today you're going to find out what it means to be inside the largest armored battle in human history. And you're going to find out that a Tiger tank is not a guarantee of survival. It's just a more expensive coffin. You didn't end up here by accident. 6 months ago you were in Erfurt, working in a loud factory bolting parts onto truck frames. The army found you before you turned 20. The aptitude tests showed good motor coordination, sharp eyesight, and calm under pressure. 3 weeks later you were at an armored warfare school in Munster, learning to operate the 88mm gun on a Panzerkampfwagen 6, the Tiger. At school, the instructor said the Tiger was invincible. That no Allied tank could penetrate its front armor at normal combat distances. That the 88mm cannon could destroy anything that got in its way. You believed it. It was easy to believe when you were safe in a classroom, looking at diagrams on a chalkboard. That was before you saw what happens to a Tiger when things go wrong. Your commander's name is Unterscharfer Brandt. 32 years old, thin mustache, eyes that always look like they're calculating something he's not going to tell you. He's been commanding this tank for 8 months. He survived Leningrad in the winter of '42. He doesn't make speeches. He doesn't talk about glory or the fatherland. When you asked him on your first day what you needed to do to survive, he looked at you for a long moment and said only, "Shoot first." Always. Asterisk. To your left is Werner, the loader. 19 years old, younger than you. He carries each 88mm round, nearly 22 pounds, with a speed that still impresses you. He hums quietly when he's nervous. You've learned to pay attention when Werner starts humming. To your right is Karl, the radio operator. He's the only one who laughs. You're not sure if it's courage or if something in him just broke before Kursk and never got fixed. You didn't ask. There are things you've learned not to ask. Operation Citadel launched on July 5, 1943. German High Command had spent months planning this attack. The idea was straightforward on the map: squeeze the Soviet salient at Kursk from both sides, cut the Red Army in half, change the course of the war in the east. On the map, it looked reasonable. Maps are comforting that way. What the map didn't show was that the Soviets knew. Spies, aerial reconnaissance, informants, they knew exactly where and when the attack was coming. While Germany was gathering its tanks, the Soviets were digging. 8 defensive lines, one behind the other. Minefields so dense the ground had more metal in it than dirt. Anti-tank guns on every hill, every ravine, every spot where a tank would naturally try to push through. You didn't know any of this when your Tiger's engine roared to life that July morning. You found out fast. The first mine went off 400 meters ahead of you. It wasn't your tank, it was Lieutenant Hoffman's Tiger, moving parallel to you on the left. Brandt opened the hatch for a brief second to assess the situation. Through that opening you saw it: the whole vehicle jumped half a foot off the ground, the right track flying off sideways. The Tiger stopped, tilted, immobilized. Alive, but stuck. A stationary steel box in the middle of a battlefield is a coffin waiting to be sealed. Brandt shut the hatch and didn't slow down. "Don't look," he said over the intercom. Asterisk, keep moving. Asterisk. You kept moving. The noise was different from what you'd imagined. In the stories, in the classroom, you expected something cinematic, dramatic explosions, clarity, order. What you found was chaos with texture. Soviet rounds bouncing off the armor sounded like a giant sledgehammer hitting the outside of a ship's hull while you're trapped inside. Every impact threw you against your seat. Every impact reminded you that something outside was trying to kill you, and that a steel plate, no matter how thick, was the only thing standing between you and it. Werner was humming. At 9:14 a.m., you spotted your first target. A T-34 coming out of a ravine at 800 meters. Fast, low, the distinctive silhouette you'd memorized back in Munster. You didn't think. Your body did what it had been trained to do. You adjusted the sight. You compensated for your own tank's movement. You waited for the exact moment. Asterisk fire. Asterisk. The 88mm went off. The recoil shook the entire tank. Smoke filled the compartment for a second before the ventilation cleared it. You looked through the viewport. The T-34 was stopped. A column of black smoke rising from the engine compartment. Brandt said, asterisk good. Asterisk just that. You reloaded. Werner already had the next round in his hands before you asked. What happened over the next 4 hours you'll spend the rest of your life trying to organize into something that makes sense. You won't manage it. Battles don't work that way, not when you're inside them. There's only the next target. The next shot. The next impact on the armor. The smell of hot metal and smoke. Brandt's voice on the intercom, always calm, always calculating. You destroyed 3 Soviet tanks that morning. You know that because Brandt kept count. You don't remember each one. You remember flashes, a Soviet turret getting blown clean off by the pressure of an internal explosion. You remember Werner stopping his humming after the second shot, and never starting again. The problem with the Tiger wasn't the armor. It wasn't the gun. It was the engine. The Maybach HL-230 that pushed those 57 tons of steel was an extraordinary engine in a vehicle that weighed more than any engine was built to handle. It overheated. It broke down. At Kursk, in the summer heat, pushing a Tiger across the uneven terrain of the Russian steppe, the engine was the most dangerous enemy you had, more dangerous than the T-34, more dangerous than Soviet artillery. At 2:37 p.m., your Tiger's engine started to fail. You felt it before you heard it, a different vibration, irregular, like a heartbeat skipping. Then the smell. Burning rubber and oil. Brandt felt it too. He shouted at the driver, but the damage was already done. The engine lost power over 90 seconds that felt like forever, and then it stopped. Silence. You were in the middle of a battlefield, immobilized, with Soviet tanks less than a mile away. Brandt opened the hatch. You heard the outside noise, distant artillery, explosions, the continuous sound of a battle that had no pause for your engine. He looked at Carl. Asterisk call for support. Now. Asterisk. Carl called. The response came in 2 minutes. Assistance was on the way. 20 minutes, maybe 30. 20 minutes inside an immobilized Tiger at Kursk was an eternity. You looked through the viewport. Counted what you could see. Smoke in 6 different directions. Tanks moving, some German, many Soviet. The battle flowed around you like water around a rock. Werner wasn't humming. Nobody was talking. You gripped the gun controls because it was the only thing that made sense to grip. You were ready to fire. You were going to fire at anything that came close. That was all you could do. The recovery vehicle arrived in 23 minutes. You never knew the driver's name. He came out onto that battlefield, hooked your Tiger up, and pulled you out under fire without hesitating. You never thanked him. There was no protocol for that. There was only the mission, and the mission kept going. The Tiger was repaired in 4 hours. You were back in the field the same day. That afternoon you destroyed 2 more Soviet tanks. By the end of July 5th, your group had advanced 7 miles. The plan called for 25. Nobody talked about that. Over the days that followed, you learned things that weren't in any manual. You learned that the smell of a destroyed Soviet tank is different from the smell of a destroyed German tank, but the smoke is the same color. You learned that the T-34, which on paper was inferior to the Tiger in armor and firepower, was being produced by the Soviets at a rate that simply didn't make sense. For every Tiger that destroyed a T-34, there were 3 more T-34s ready to take its place. You learned that winning an individual engagement meant nothing if you were losing the bigger battle. You learned, above everything else, that the Tiger was an extraordinary weapon in a battle that couldn't be won by extraordinary weapons alone. Brandt knew this. You could see it in his eyes when the radio brought updates: insufficient advance in the northern sector, heavy losses in the south, Soviet resistance beyond any projection. He'd listen, process, say nothing. Then he'd turn back to face forward and say, *, next target. *. You followed. Because that was all there was to do. On the 8th day, Werner was gone. 7 days of targets, repairs, and sleepless hours had passed since the engine broke down, and on the 8th, it ended for him. A metal fragment came through the ventilation slit during an artillery barrage and went through his right forearm. Deep enough to pull him out of the tank, not deep enough to kill him. They took him back to the aid station. A new loader showed up the next morning. You never caught his name. You realized, in that moment, that you had stopped trying. Not stopped fighting, stopped trying to see the people around you as people. They were functions. The loader loaded. The radio operator radioed. The driver drove. You fired. Brandt commanded. That was all that mattered inside 57 tons of steel in the middle of Kursk. It was easier that way. You told yourself it was easier that way. Operation Citadel was called off on July 23, 1943. 18 days. The largest armored engagement in human history. More than 6,000 tanks, 2 million soldiers, on a stretch of land that looked small on the map and felt endless on the ground. Germany didn't win. It didn't lose in one catastrophic day. It lost the way the cruelest defeats happen, slowly, mile by mile, tank by tank, until High Command admitted what Brandt probably knew by day 3, the battle could not be won. You rolled out of Kursk inside the same Tiger you rolled in with. That put you in a small minority. Brandt said nothing when the order to pull back came. He just closed the hatch, tapped the driver on the shoulder twice, and the engine, which this time worked, carried you away from that field. You looked through the viewport one last time. The steppe was unrecognizable. The flat, grass-covered ground had been replaced by craters, twisted metal, and columns of smoke rising in 10 different directions. You couldn't tell where the wheat field had been. You couldn't tell where anything had been. You thought about the instructor back in Munster. About the word invincible. About the diagram on the chalkboard. The Tiger was an extraordinary machine. That was true. Armor that bounced off enemy rounds. A cannon that could destroy anything at over a mile. Engineering that had no equal on the battlefield in 1943. And still, you thought about Werner. The way he hummed quietly when he was scared, and stopped humming after the second shot, and never started again. You don't know where he is now. You don't know if he survived the aid station, if he made it home, if he has kids somewhere who have no idea what their father lived through that summer in Russia. You thought about the recovery vehicle driver. The man who came out onto that battlefield, under fire, to pull out a broken tank and 5 men he'd never met. You never asked his name. You never thanked him. He drove into the smoke and disappeared back into the battle like he'd never existed at all. You thought about Carl, who laughed when nobody else could. And about Brandt, who probably knew by day 3 and kept saying next target because it was the only honest thing left to say. The reports written about Kursk talk about tanks destroyed. Miles gained and lost. Objectives not reached. Numbers. History remembers the Tiger, its armor, its gun, its troubled engine. History remembers the statistics. No report mentions Werner humming. No report mentions the driver with no name. That's how war is told, in machines and maps and numbers. But that's not how war is lived. War is lived in 5 men inside a steel box, learning each other's nicknames because real names feel too dangerous to use. The Tiger weighed 57 tons. The people inside it weighed nothing in the reports. And maybe that's what you need to understand about any war, in any era, anywhere in the world. The real cost is never in the numbers history preserves. It's in the names history forgets.